It didn't take long for Hazel to realize that something was wrong with her beloved town of Starling. As a witch, she kept her eyes open to more things than most, observing the natural flow of the environment. Starling was bustling and busy. People were always walking and doing things. However, as Hazel walked down the main road in town, she didn't see or hear a single soul. As clouds rolled through the sky from above, Hazel couldn't help but think how eerie it seemed. Unable to quell her curiosity, Hazel walked into the closest house, searching for a single living soul. She ventured all the way to the bedroom before she finally spotted a person, but they hardly seemed like a person at all. To Hazel's confusion and horror, she watched a zombie-like man groan and slowly roll onto his side in his bed, dark crescents under his eyes and stress lines in his pale skin of his forehead. He looked dead inside, like life had been sucked from him. Hazel darted from the house, needing to figure out what was going on. She checked a few more houses, seeing people passed out over their homework, weakly coughing up a storm. Everyone seemed so drained, like they were shells of their former selves, their energy and motivation sapped. Hazel knew that she had to help them somehow. With her black hair streaming behind her and her matching black dress fluttering around her body, Hazel rushed to her small house up the road. She hurried inside the main room in front of the fireplace, her hand reaching into a pot to grab a handful of black powder. She tossed it into the fireplace, flames immediately sprouting inside. She readied her black cauldron, turning her shelf near the fireplace that was packed with jars full of different ingredients. 3 that could help the townspeople came to mind as she started to brew. Hazel grabbed 3 jars that contained 3 different kinds of mushrooms with healing properties. She popped up the cork to the first jar, reaching inside to grab a dark orange, kidney-shaped mushroom called reishi. Having been used in traditional Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years, it was good for stress and restful sleep. It seemed like a piece of the puzzle to her since so many people seemed so tired and stressed out. She tossed it into the cauldron before reaching into another jar. The next mushroom was lion's mane, which looked fluffy and bright white. Hazel typically liked eating it for its meaty texture, but it was also good for increasing focus, creativity, and productivity. She figured a dose of that wouldn't hurt the townspeople now, who seemed to be in a slump. Once she tossed that one in, Hazel grabbed the last mushroom, which was chaga. It had the look of charcoal. She loved brewing it into a tea whenever the weather turned cold and she felt a cold threatening her. It was great for the immune system, which seemed to be suffering in some of the townspeople. Hazel started to stir the ingredients together. Thick smoke started to pour heavily from the cauldron to the point where she couldn't even see anything. She coughed and stumbled back, waving her hand to try and clear the smoke away until she could actually see her living room again. However, instead of a cauldron full of mushrooms, she saw 3 beings in front of her. One of them was a beautiful Zen master, her lean body adorned in black robes with her dark hair streaming down her back. Another looked like a superhero, wearing a light blue bodysuit with a black cape over his muscular body, and his hair brown and slicked back as his eyes peered out of a black eye mask. And last but not least, the other being had on a light gray trench coat above a white shirt and dark trousers. A checkered hat sat on his head, its bill casting shadows over his inquisitive expression. He reminded her of a detective. Hazel had learned to stop questioning the often strange effects of magic a long time ago. Even as a young adult, she had experienced plenty of odd happenings. Besides, she had a town to save, so there was no time for questions. She had to go with her intuition, which told her that each being represented each mushroom and its abilities. The Zen master was reishi, the superhero was chaga, and the detective was lion's mane. "I need your help. The townspeople are basically zombies. They won't move over or stop groaning. They look terrible," Hazel exclaimed to the 3 beings, hoping they could somehow help her solve this mystery. She couldn't do it alone. "Well, that's what we're here for, kid," said Lion's Mane, replied as he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Let's save these poor innocents," Chaga's voice boomed through Hazel's small house. "Lead the way," Reishi murmured softly, gesturing to the front door. Hazel nodded and led them out to her house and through the quiet town, a soft breeze rustling through her hair. She took them to the first house that she had ventured into, leading them into the bedroom and gesturing to the man. He was lying on his face, his pillow slightly muffling his exhausted groans. "See? He seems so stressed out that he can't sleep," Hazel sighed, watching the man bury his face into his pillow with a frown on her face. It saddened her to see her fellow townspeople in such awful state. "He needs relaxation and to acquire peace in his mind," Reishi hummed as she approached the man's bedside. She gently rolled him over, exposing his bloodshot, glossy eyes full of exhaustion. Looking unfazed, she guided him into a sitting position before sitting cross-legged in front of him, her hands gripping his wrists. "Breathe in," Rishi told the man, his shaggy hair sticking up everywhere from rolling around in the bed. She placed a hand on his chest as he threatened to topple forward, balancing him out so that he could take a breath. Once he did and straightened up some, Rishi smiled at Hazel. "I'll take care of him. He just needs to relax. So go help the others," she coaxed from the others before turning back to the man, giving him soft orders. Hazel snapped out of watching Rishi work with awe, prompting her to rush out of the house with the others. She headed across the street, intent on getting the townspeople the help that they needed. She hoped that she had the right team for it. She led them inside the other house, silence greeting them. After looking around, she found a woman slumped over her laptop on a desk, muttering to herself. Numerous papers, documents sprawled across the surface. "Well, what should we do about her?" Hazel asked as they slowly approached the woman from behind. Hazel jumped as the woman slightly slammed her forehead against her keyboard before shaking her head agitatedly. "Well, it looks like someone is having trouble getting their work done," Lion's Mane quipped as he stepped forward to inspect the human, tapping his chin. He hummed and nodded before grabbing the discarded papers and stacking them into a neat pile beside the laptop. He held up a finger before disappearing into the kitchen for a few minutes. He soon returned with a cup of coffee, which he placed on the other side of the laptop. "Our greatest contribution is to the world around us, is our very productivity," Lion's Mane commented as he grabbed the woman's shoulders and sat her up straight in her chair. All right, let's focus. We're going to make a list of things to do and to do every single one of them," Lion's Mane told the woman as he gave her an encouraging shake, his hand waving from the others to leave so that he could get her back on track. Hazel led Chaga out of the house, breathing out a sigh of relief briefly. However, it wasn't over yet. 2 people were being healed, but there were plenty more to help. She went into another house, searching for a person in need, and spotting an older man lying on the couch. He looked weak and pale, sweat beading on his forehead as a thermometer stuck out of his mouth, tissues littering the floor next to the couch. The thermometer displayed a temperature of 100.5 degrees. "What happened to him?" Hazel breathed out, shaking her head in disbelief at the man's condition, worry filling her. Some people seemed to be worse off than others, but it was all bad. "When the mind suffers, the body does too, and vice versa," Chaga announced in his deep voice, his hands settling on his hips as he gazed down at the man. "Stress can cause sickness?" Hazel asked. "Stress can cause a whole lot of slate of bad things. The people in this town are working too hard. Do you see what the stress and exhaustion are doing to them? It's sucking the literal life out of them," Chaga explained to her as he reached out to touch the end of the thermometer with his forefinger. Suddenly, 100.5 degrees gradually dropped to 98.6. He handed the man a clean tissue, who used it to weakly mop up the sweat adorning his forehead. "We have a lot of healing to do, but I think we can save this town," Chaga told Hazel as he placed his palm over the man's forehead. It took the entire day of constant visits and individualized care to each and every townsperson until things started to return back to normal. As Hazel stood on the main road in town with the sun steadily settling behind her, she finally started to notice movement as people ventured out of their homes, stretching their limbs and breathing in the fresh air. They looked like they'd just come back to life. Gradually, sounds started to erupt all over town, voices and happy laughter echoing down the street. Eventually, Reishi, Lion's Mane, and Chaga headed back her way. "We actually did it," Hazel breathed out as she shook her head in disbelief. She had actually conjured up the right brew to save her town. "Interesting how you didn't fall victim to that peculiar fate," Reishi murmured. Hazel blinked in surprise, having not thought of that. "It's because she experiences less stress from the motions of modern life. She doesn't have to meet the deadlines, make reports, work in an office all day, take care of children, or worry about conforming to modern society," Reishi pointed out. Hazel supposed that was true. She had her fair amount of stress, but she didn't get burnt out day to day doing those things. Plus, she had the ingredients and knowledge to brew concoctions to help her release her stress. There were perks to being a witch. Won't they all just go back to being zombies eventually? They still have to go back to their normal lives, Hazel fretted, not wanting this to happen all over again. Reishi waved her hand dismissively as she shared a smile with the others. "Don't worry about that. We help teach their bodies to adapt to such stress and how to diminish it, whether it be from work or relationships, lack of sleep and productivity, or just not feeling good. If they forget, you know where to find us," Reishi replied. A smile crossed Hazel's face as she nodded and turned her eyes back to the town as the main road filled with people. Color finally started to bleed back into the black and white picture. Children played in the streets. Adults chatted in small groups as they walked. They were reveling in being alive, and living a life of diminished stress and boundless happiness. That was how things were supposed to be, and Hazel would work to keep it that way, no matter what.